Welcome back to the Color Pink Podcast. I'm Sydney.
I am Halle.
And today we are introducing the first episode of the Scientist series. If you need to get caught up to speed on what the Scientist series is, we have a trailer that beautifully explains it. If it doesn't, take it up with your mother, please.
It does, though. It should explain what you need to know.
Yeah, it should. Oh my god, I'm having deja vu right now. This is so weird. But I think I literally dreamt this. You know, I had a dream the other day where I was walking through the snow in socks.
You okay, buddy?
No.
Yeah, I'm honestly secondhand not okay.
Yeah.
Cold feet, the worst. Wet feet, the worst.
Using your feet, the worst. No, I'm kidding. I love using my feet for walking specifically.
Coming on strong, episode 1.
Episode 1. Okay, so we're gonna get into it today.
We are. Well, welcome for the first time to the Scientist series, a 10 episode, give or take, series about this tool that we love and we preach about all the time, the scientist in the lab rat, which in essence is a way to create change and evolve in your own life with increased kindness and decreased shame.
Yes.
So each episode is going to center around one way or one instance in which we've used the tool, the scientist in the lab rat. And today we're focused on one of my experiments. Yeah.
What is that experiment?
This is something I absolutely love, and I've been doing it for probably 6 or 7 years now.
Crazy.
Not consistently all the time, but in chunks of time. And it is called, and I really hope this is not, is this a problem that it's called this?
I think, not to get political, but I think the people who perceive it as a problem are very problematic as a whole. It's hard to appropriate the majority.
The majority of white Catholics. Okay. This experiment of mine, tried and true, is called weekly lent.
I love it.
Okay.
Let's trademark it.
I love this shit. And I'm telling you, this shit works for me.
Yeah.
So the idea of Lent, as far as I know, and I don't, because I'm not Catholic.
I used to be a Catholic, so I can tell you if it's wrong or not.
Okay. Great. Because my understanding of Lent is that you don't pick a month, they pick a month. Jesus picks a month. Isn't it you just give up something to reconnect with Jesus?
Pretty much. So the idea for Lent is that Jesus died for our sins. It ends on Christmas, or it ends on Easter. Jesus, me saying hour does not mean hour. Jesus died for his followers' sins.
His followers. So
you give up one thing during Lent as a way to honor Jesus' sacrifice. People give up meat. People give up sugar. It's supposed to be something that you feel the sacrifice,
the actual
of.
Sacrifice. Okay, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Thank you. That's what Lent is.
Yes.
And so I had that basic understanding of the word Lent, and I started weekly Lent. So instead of giving up something to honor Jesus, because I don't know him, I would be giving up something to honor myself.
Yeah.
Okay.
In your development.
My development. And I knew I had all these kids around me, and I saw Bob's Burgers episode about Lent. And I knew that they were learning about their relationship to that thing and reconnecting with some other thing as a result of having a period of time where they give something up, right? So I introduced weekly Lent, and I pick something that I have an attachment to. And I would feel, I don't want to say the sacrifice, but I would feel the absence of it significantly and give it up only for a week. So it's not torturous, but it is very educational. I've given up a fuck ton of things. I've given up ice cream 45 times.
I love ice cream.
Weeks. Yeah. I've given up being an iPad kid. I've given up people. Those were refreshing. I've given up texting my worms. I've given up a bunch of random things.
Worms means a hose, by the way.
I've given up a lot of wild things over the years.
Yeah.
Yeah. But weekly Lent was not born out of, it would be fun.
Yeah.
It was not.
So what was weekly Lent born out of? What was the intention, the seed of intention that was planted?
Shame. I just felt so much shame. I think I started weekly Lent when I lived in Miami, which was the worst, the fucking worst. And I just felt shame constantly. I felt like I have all these attachments to all these things, and with them, I am going to ruin my own life. That's how I felt. I felt like I have no control over all these things, and I just use them all to cope. I just speed through them. I never get to be at a distance from them enough to study my relationship with them.
Yeah.
And so it was pretty much shame and chaos and sadness that drove me to design something like Weekly Lent and hope it taught me something.
Yeah. One thing that I'm thinking of, right, is that we tend to have these things that we have strong relationships with that we might not know we have strong relationships with. Like for me, anytime I get overwhelmed, I go and sit on my couch and scroll through TikTok, right? It's like almost like you have these default behaviors that maybe aren't, I hate to use this word, like the most productive or the most kind towards you. That's what it sounds like you're using Weekly Lent for.
I'm not giving up things I know that serve me.
Yes.
I'm giving up things I know that comfort me in potentially ways that don't serve me.
Yeah.
And I'm also not giving up things that I just have like a lukewarm whatever relationship with. It's things that are loaded for me. Yeah. And I think that's why I chose a weekly Lent, because it's a kind timeline.
Yes.
Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's a kind timeline. It is not that rigid. You need to cut out ice cream. You need to sell your iPad. You need to break your phone. You need to, it's not that. It's not that. Yeah. It's a kind timeline.
You know what's so interesting too is that when people, I feel like the default in society is that when you recognize something you're using as like a crutch in some ways, or like just like to comfort you, the automatic response is make it hard on yourself, completely eliminate it. And it's like, hold on. Maybe like that specific behavior or that specific thing that we're leaning on that we would use for Weekly Lent isn't the problem. Maybe that's not the problem. Maybe it's something that's a little bit deeper. And so it also helps in like just gaining a deeper level of perspective and understanding, because it's like we have action urges. We have certain things that we want to default to. Why? And this is something that we stress a lot in the Subjective Living series. Why are we doing things? Not how are we doing things, but why are we doing things? And Weekly Lent helps us discover the why.
It does.
Yeah.
It helps us discover a lot. I don't want to eliminate these things from my life because there's a large joy element to them. There's a large community element to them. I don't want to sell my iPad because I love Procreate and I get to edit our podcast on there. And I've had quality times where I'm sitting around my living room with my friends quiet on our iPads just drawing. That matters to me. I also don't want to eliminate ice cream. It's joyful for me. I'm surprised I didn't invent the Museum of Ice Cream, honestly. And I would have done it better. No hate.
I've been there. I agree.
I totally would have done it better. I would have done a lot of these museums.
I mean, but like if y'all sponsor us, we'll take it back.
Great point. Great point. But yeah, exactly what you said. Typically when you identify something you lean on emotionally, you identify it as an evil, a crutch. It needs to be eliminated. That to me is not kind, and it's also not informative.
I agree.
It's jarring.
Yeah.
And this process is informative.
Yeah.
1 week is enough time to learn about my relationship to whatever it is I eliminate. It's enough time to feel the feelings of its absence.
Yeah.
It's enough time to see what I fill that with instead. It's also enough time to learn if there is some peace in its absence.
Yeah.
It's enough time to learn a lot of things without being aggressive or jarring for me.
So to recap, some of the feelings, the emotions that you were having that would trigger an experiment like Weekly Lent. Shame is a big one. Huge one. Shame, I guess, is really the big one. Yeah. Shame. Yeah. When it comes to you being the scientist, how are you structuring Weekly Lent? Besides, obviously, it being a weekly break from something.
Being the scientist, what that meant to me was deciding the parameters of the experiment, deciding it was a week and not 2 weeks, a month, or a year, right? Because I could have been aggressive and said, let's go a year.
Yeah.
It's wild. So it's deciding the parameters. And a big piece of being the scientist here for me is figuring out how to document what is happening. What are the things I'm trying to learn? What are the questions that I'm answering in moments that I feel that I would fill this moment with the thing I gave up.
Yeah.
Right. This is where I say I'm structured in my experiments.
Yeah.
I have a list of criteria in a Google Doc somewhere.
Yeah.
And every time I crave my iPad, but know that I'm giving it up this week, I answer these 3 questions. Right. And then I do I am a researcher by day.
Yeah.
So I do a synthesis at the end and see what I learned. And I like that stuff and I learn a lot. That's what it looks like to be the scientist, to do that intentional part up front and then that reflective analytical part on the back end, and then be a giddy scientist who decides what to give up next.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So reflection is a really big thing for you. Are there general questions that you ask yourself for every single experiment, or are they tailored to your experiment? And if they are tailored, could you just give examples of the questions that you would ask?
Yeah. To be honest, I haven't done weekly Lent since I moved in here. So since November, it's been a while. But if I had to guess, if I had to go deep in my brain waves, my ridged brain waves, and think, the questions would be something like, why is this your instinct if you know the answer? Mm-hmm. Or what is the talk track in your head right now?
Yeah.
Or what do you observe in this moment in the absence of whatever? Something like that, broad enough that I can notice things.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And you know what's really beautiful about that is mindfulness.
Yeah.
And I think that's super important when you're playing scientist and lab rat.
Yeah.
Is to be mindful, because if you're not and you're just going through the motions and you're just trying to hit certain like objectives, the experiment's really not going to serve you.
Yes.
But like, can you talk more about what your experience is like being the lab rat in weekly Lent?
I can. One other thing I just want to say before we do. I'm thinking about why, as a perceiver, I'm so structured about my experiments, and I actually figured out the answer.
Oh, okay.
It's because I'm a perceiver. I need structure for these experiments to be worth anything.
Yeah.
I have come to terms with the fact that I have a lot to offer myself and other people, but consistency is just not an expectation I want to have of myself. Mm-hmm. If I don't have a lot of tools in place to make consistency easy and approachable.
Yeah.
So having the same 3 questions that I go back to, and the cue is when I crave this thing, to have that structure built into my experiment, it's easier to actually do it.
Yeah.
It's easier to carry it out and not be an unemployed scientist.
Per.
So what was it like being the lab rat?
Yeah.
Is that your question? It was a little of everything. Keep in mind, I'm withdrawing things that are coping mechanisms for me. Mm-hmm. So this is where I'm not in the moment as the lab rat during the week pushing myself. You need to be okay with not being able to watch Survivor. You need to be okay with one thing I took away actually was colors, wearing colors.
Oh.
Yeah. I wanted to learn about my relationship with it.
Yeah.
You know, I wanted to learn what it did for me. So I have just a long, interesting list of things I've done for weekly Lent. I really should keep better track because it's fascinating. You know, my experience as the lab rat was having to really give myself full permission to act natural, because that's how I'm going to learn about my relationship to these things. Mm-hmm. So normally they were not pretty. There were a lot of emotion, a lot of feelings in my head, my heart, my body, you know, a lot of craving and pouting and protesting and all of these things. Mm-hmm. You know, it wasn't necessarily pretty.
Yeah. But
it was kind. The structure was kind and it was educational, you know. And listen, when we think of scientists and we think of lab rats, I think of like Doofenshmirtz and like an ugly little rat, you know. I'm like, that's not that cute. But scientist and lab rat is also kind of like your higher intentional self. Yeah. And your honest child self, you know. And it's like, if you think about it that way, it's easier in moments of the inner child who wants ice cream, protesting, to be the higher self who's saying, I get it. Mm-hmm. You can cry, but this is the experiment. That's, you know, so
beautiful.
Yeah. So that's what it was like. At times great, at times hard, fruitful.
Ooh, okay. So what are some of the learnings from weekly Lent? I mean, I'm sure there's like a billion.
Yeah, there are many.
From the general concept of weekly Lent, what are some of the learnings?
First one is things I think I can't do, I can do in doses.
A word.
Yeah. Cold turkey is masculine energy as fuck. It's annoying. It's jarring. And honestly, it drives me away from myself. It increases my shame. It increases my chaos. All the things I'm trying to move away from. It's not a strategy that does it for me. So I'm just not going to do it.
I feel like cold turkey is all about discipline and not necessarily about like supporting yourself. You know, it's like, I'm taking this away from you because it's dependent. It's not a healthy coping mechanism. But at the same time, if you don't stay away from this, you're this, and this.
Yes.
So it's like it's like a 2-punch.
And I cannot physically, mentally, emotionally separate shame from a cold turkey approach.
Yeah.
Because if my goal is remove it immediately and it never returns, to keep that possible, I have to use shame to manage that. I would have to shame myself into keeping away for longer than a week.
That makes sense to me.
And that's why it's a week.
Yeah.
So that's the first one. The second one is that and this is a big one for me in most of my experiments, I am more okay than I think I am. I am not as deeply flawed as I think I am. You know, I'm not. In an experiment this simple, I can better my relationship with myself. I can build my trust with myself, you know? If I say I'm giving up something forever, every time I don't give it up, I'm losing trust with myself.
Yeah.
By setting a kind timeline, a kind expectation, I'm building trust with myself for a week straight, over and over and over on a million different subjects. To me, it's just duh.
Yeah.
It's really duh. The other big thing is, in the absence of one thing, I can learn about my relationship. This is the 2 + 2 is 5. Not only am I learning about my relationship with the thing I gave up, but I'm learning about my relationship with other things.
Yeah.
When I give up YouTube, for example, I learn about my relationship with books. When I give up digital art, I learn about my relationship with physical art. These experiments were more fruitful than I, as a scientist, ever imagined they could be.
Yeah. That's beautiful.
Thank you.
So with the progression of weekly Lent, what are the emotions that you experienced after completing weekly Lent or from weekly Lent that keep you inspired and
committed to weekly Lent?
Yeah.
First and foremost, I feel proud of myself. It's nice to know that I can do the things that I want to do. Even though I know that there's an element of them that are hard. I feel proud of myself for doing hard things. I have a friend who, shout out Olivia, a lovely parent. I grew up with her. She met me the day I was born, and we're still friends. And she is healing through her mothering so many of the things that were messed up for us as kids. One thing she always says to her kids is, you can do hard things. You can have emotions while you do them. It's okay, but you can do hard things.
Yeah.
And it's funny that it works on her 3-year-old and it works on me.
Crazy, right?
Yeah. And so I now feel proud. I feel empowered to do hard things, even if there are emotions present. I feel increased trust with myself. And because I feel all of those things, I feel more peace in my space, in myself, and in my relationship with those things. Even if they're still loaded, there's more peace injected into them after the experiment. More peace, less chaos.
Yeah.
You know?
I think something that we talk about a lot is corrective experiences. Yeah. And I mean, I think even like the whole Scientist series, right, is about providing yourself with corrective experiences that help you challenge beliefs that you have about yourself.
Yeah.
I think that's beautiful.
Yeah, I do too. This is one that I swear by. I hope to do it, honestly, forever. I would love to get in the routine of doing it every week and having even more structure that makes that possible.
Yeah. I think something that's also really brilliant about weekly Lent is that when you think about the scientific method, right?
Which we often do.
Honestly, I think about that shit every day.
I don't know what that means. I mean, I know the term, but I wouldn't pass the pop quiz.
Essentially, there's a way to conduct an experiment. So you first identify the hypothesis.
Oh, okay.
You establish the controls. Something that's really great about weekly Lent is that I think a lot of times we put this expectation on ourselves that like, this isn't doing well, or I'm not feeling this. I don't like this. The solution is to complete 180, go cold turkey on like a whole bunch of behaviors, right? That's not sustainable to do that. It causes a lot of distrust with yourself if you end up falling back into some of those behaviors. You're not establishing a control. So it's like you're testing a bunch of different things at the same time. It's like skincare. Like if you inject like 2-3 products into your skincare routine at one time,
you don't know what they're doing for you.
Yeah. And you like, and if you start breaking out, you don't know what product it is.
True.
And weekly Lent is a really great way to just isolate one thing at a time.
Yes.
And still achieve the same results, but get way more out of it than you would if you completely like changed your shit. With like life coaches, it's like, you need to start getting up at 5 a.m. You need to take a shot of wheatgrass every single morning. You need to do all these things. Like, you're implementing like a ton of new behaviors at once, and then you wonder why you can't stick with it. Yeah. Weekly Lent, great alternative. Yeah.
Yep. And I just think weekly Lent is so extremely kind.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
It really is, you know? Because if I don't know, if I pushed myself to make these changes, like, my goal is to set up an experiment, learn about myself, and then trust that what I need to evolve in life is new information, kindness, self-trust, to feel empowered to make changes. I trust myself to change when I have those things available to me, as opposed to what I need to make change is a double dose of fucking masculine ass discipline because I can't do shit and blah, 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 blah. Like, I've tried that.
It didn't fucking work.
It did not fucking work. Weekly Lent. That's that.
Well, pink people, you decide that you want to participate in weekly Lent. Send us a fucking message. Let us know what you're participating in, how that goes.
What you giving up?
Yeah, what are you giving up? We're curious. It could be anything. With that said, thank you so much for listening to today's episode. Depending on when you listen to this, we'll have a new episode with a completely new experiment sometime next week. If you want to find us somewhere, we're on Instagram at The Color Pink Podcast. We also have an email, thecolorpinkpodcast@gmail.com, if you want to get in touch with us that way. That's today's episode. Thanks so much for listening.
There it is. Peace out.
Peace.